Wheelchair-bound girl gets stuck in bathroom, and the cat does what no adult thought of. Olivia Johnson pulled the doorknob for the third time, feeling panic rise in her chest. The door to the adapted bathroom simply wouldn't budge, as if something was blocking it from the other side. "Help!" she shouted, slapping her palms against the wood. "The door's stuck!" Outside, Shadow began meowing in a way she'd never heard before. The cat seemed to understand something was terribly wrong. Olivia tried reaching for the emergency latch at the top of the door, but even stretching her arm to the limit, her fingers barely grazed the cold metal. "Shadow, I need you to help me somehow," she whispered, fighting to stay calm. The apartment was completely silent. Her parents had left early for her cousin Jennifer's wedding in Miami, a celebration Olivia refused to attend after the argument about her independence. They wanted to hire a caregiver to stay with her over the weekend, which had infuriated her. "I'm not a child," she'd yelled the night before. "I can take care of myself just fine." Now, trapped in that small space, she began questioning her own stubbornness. Her phone was on the living room table, plugged into the charger, completely out of reach. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. The girl who wanted to prove her independence was now entirely dependent on help. Shadow's meows grew louder and more desperate. Olivia pressed her ear to the door, trying to figure out what the animal was doing. Strange noises came from the living room, as if he was knocking things over. "What are you up to, boy?" Shadow was a special cat. Olivia had found him 2 years ago, injured and abandoned near the university where she studied psychology. The animal had a scar on his muzzle and limped on his left hind leg, but his green eyes shone with an intelligence she'd never seen in other cats. Since arriving at the apartment, he'd displayed odd behaviors, almost as if he'd been trained for something. The noise in the living room intensified. Something heavy hit the floor, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Olivia bit her lower lip, worried. If Shadow was hurting himself trying to help her, she'd never forgive herself. "Calm down, Shadow. Don't hurt yourself for me." But the cat didn't stop. If anything, the noises multiplied. It was as if he was deliberately making a racket, trying to get attention. Olivia closed her eyes, processing the situation. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building in Chinatown, New York. The neighbors were usually home on Sundays, especially Mrs. Margaret, the 68-year-old woman who lived next door. Mrs. Margaret had a reputation for being cranky. She always complained when Olivia played music or when her college friends came over to study. The woman would bang on the shared wall when she thought the noise was too much. Olivia had always thought she was exaggerating, but now she prayed the neighbor was home and could hear the chaos Shadow was causing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to the story. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the building's hallway. Olivia held her breath, hopeful. Someone had heard the noise. Muffled voices reached her from the common area of the floor. "That cat has gone completely crazy," came Mrs. Margaret's shrill voice. "He's knocking everything over on the balcony." "Calm down, Mrs. Margaret," replied a male voice Olivia recognized as Harold's, the building superintendent. "I'll go up and see what's happening. That irresponsible girl isn't even home. She left the animal alone, and now look at this mess." Olivia felt a pang of irritation, but quickly replaced it with relief. If Mrs. Margaret was complaining, it meant she was paying attention to the apartment. Maybe Shadow really was trying to call for help. "Help!" she shouted louder, banging on the door. "I'm stuck in the bathroom!" Complete silence from outside. Her heart raced. Could they not hear through the thick walls of the old building? The apartment had excellent soundproofing, something she'd always considered an advantage, but now felt like a nightmare. Shadow meowed again, but this time the sound came from farther away, as if he'd left the apartment. How was that possible? The door was locked, and Olivia was sure she'd closed the living room window before going to the bathroom. Then she remembered. The kitchen window. She'd left it slightly open to air out the place after making breakfast. Shadow must have pushed it open completely and gone out onto the shared balcony connecting to the other apartments. It was a communal space, created when the building was renovated years ago to improve airflow. The meow now clearly came from the balcony. It sounded like Shadow was on Mrs. Margaret's balcony, making even more noise. Olivia almost laughed at the situation. imagining the neighbor's angry face upon finding a grey cat trampling her potted plants. "Get out of here, you little pest," shouted Mrs. Margaret. "Let me see," said Mr. Harold. "Isn't that Olivia's cat? How strange for him to be here. Of course it's hers, always meowing on the balcony, bothering me. Now he's invaded my home." Olivia banged on the wall hard, trying to make enough noise for them to notice her presence. The wall was thick, but some sound should get through. She knocked in a specific pattern, just like Mrs. Margaret always did when she wanted to complain. Knock, 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 pause, knock, knock, knock. "What's that noise?" murmured Mr. Harold. "Must be her TV," replied Mrs. Margaret, still annoyed with Shadow. "No, Mrs. Margaret, that noise is different. It's like someone's knocking on the wall." Olivia repeated the pattern, this time harder. Her hands were starting to hurt, but she couldn't stop. It was her only chance to communicate. Knock, 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 pause, knock, 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 pause, knock, knock, knock. "This is strange," said Mr. Harold. "I'll knock on her door to see if everything's okay." Olivia's heart raced. Finally, someone was paying attention. She heard footsteps moving away, probably Mr. Harold heading to the apartment's front door. A few seconds later, knocks echoed through the apartment. "Olivia, is everything okay in there?" "Help!" she shouted with all her strength. "I'm stuck in the bathroom. The door's jammed." Silence. Then, footsteps running back to the balcony. "Mrs. Margaret, the girl's stuck in the bathroom. We need to get into the apartment." "How? The door's locked." Olivia heard voices multiplying. Other building residents must have come up to see what was happening. She recognized Mrs. Dorothy's voice from the apartment below, and Mr. Richards, a retiree who always greeted her politely in the elevator. "Is there a spare key?" asked Mr. Richard. "Not that I know of," replied Mr. Harold. "Her parents left early this morning. I saw them with their suitcases." "What now?" asked Mrs. Dorothy. "The girl could be in trouble." Olivia felt tears burning her eyes. She wasn't exactly in trouble, but the situation was becoming desperate. The bathroom was small, and even though it was adapted for her wheelchair, the limited space was starting to trigger a claustrophobic feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Then Shadow did something that left everyone stunned. His meow changed completely, becoming a low, drawn-out sound that almost seemed like a call. Then they heard the sound of something being dragged across the porch floor. "What is that cat doing?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "It looks like he's trying to show us something," said Mr. Harold, surprised. Olivia pressed her ear to the wall, trying to catch every word. The conversation outside grew quieter, as if everyone was bending down to see what Shadow was doing. "Oh my goodness!" exclaimed Mrs. Dorothy. "He brought a key." "A key? What do you mean?" asked Mr. Richard. "Look here. The cat brought a key and placed it at my feet." Olivia's eyes widened. The spare key. She always hid an extra apartment key under the spice pot she kept on the shared porch. It was a spot she considered safe. Who would suspect a key was there? But how did Shadow know? "Could it be the apartment key?" asked Mrs. Margaret skeptically. "Only one way to find out," said Mr. Harold. "I'll test it." Footsteps faded again, and Olivia gripped the bathroom sink, trembling with anticipation. If the key worked, she'd soon be free. If not, she'd rather not think about that possibility. The sound of the lock turning reached her like music to her ears. The front door creaked open familiarly. "Olivia, where are you?" shouted Mr. Harold. "In the bathroom, the door's completely stuck." Hurried footsteps approached. Olivia heard several people entering the apartment, followed by Shadow's satisfied meow. "The door really is stuck," said Mr. Harold, trying to turn the knob. "Looks like the mechanism broke from the inside." "How are we going to get her out?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, worried. "Hold on, let me see," replied a voice Olivia didn't expect to hear. "Mrs. Margaret. Before I retired, I worked in building maintenance. I know these mechanisms." Olivia blinked in surprise. Mrs. Margaret was a building maintenance technician? That explained why she always complained about the building noises with such authority. She knew exactly when something wasn't working right. "I'll need a few tools," said Mrs. Margaret. "Mr. Harold, do you have a screwdriver and pliers in your kit?" "Yes, Mrs. Margaret. I'll go get them." While Mr. Harold left to fetch the tools, Mrs. Dorothy approached the door. "Olivia, dear, are you okay in there? You're not feeling sick, are you?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Dorothy, just a little nervous, and so grateful you're all helping me." "No need to thank us, sweetheart. We're neighbors. It's our duty to help each other." Olivia felt a lump in her throat. All these years living in the building, she'd assumed the neighbors saw her as a burden or an obligation. Discovering they genuinely cared about her well-being was an emotional revelation. "How did Shadow know about the key?" she asked curiously. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen," replied Mrs. Dorothy. "The cat ran straight to the porch, went right for Mrs. Margaret's spice pot, knocked everything over, picked up the key with his mouth and placed it at Mr. Harold's feet, like he knew exactly what he was doing." "I've never seen an animal act like that," murmured Mr. Richard. "It was like he understood the situation perfectly." Olivia smiled, feeling proud of Shadow. The cat had always been special, but she'd never imagined he was capable of such a coordinated, intelligent act. It was as if he'd had a plan all along. Mr. Harold returned with the tools, and Mrs. Margaret immediately got to work on the door mechanism. Olivia listened to the metallic sounds as the woman dismantled the locking system. "The problem is the electronic part broke," explained Mrs. Margaret, speaking louder so Olivia could hear. "These automatic systems are handy, but when they fail, they're a nightmare. The emergency latch is also stuck." "Can you fix it?" asked Richard. "I can try, but it'll take a while. The mechanism is more complex than it looks." Olivia leaned her back against the cold bathroom wall, trying to calm herself. The situation was being resolved, but the delay was starting to stir her anxiety. Memories of another involuntary confinement began to surface in her mind, bringing back sensations she'd rather keep buried. 15 years ago, when she could still walk, she'd been trapped in an elevator for 4 hours. It was in that elevator that her life changed forever. A free-fall accident resulting in the injury that left her in a wheelchair. The feeling of being stuck in a small space, relying on others for her freedom, brought back all the vulnerability she'd fought so hard to overcome. "Breathe, Olivia," she whispered to herself. "This is different. You're not alone." Shadow meowed from the other side of the door, as if sensing her distress. The familiar sound of the cat's purring reached her, offering some comfort. He was there, watchful, caring for her in his own way. "Margaret, can I ask you something?" Olivia said, trying to distract herself. "Of course, dear. Keep talking. It helps me focus on the work." "Did you always know about mechanics?" Margaret let out a soft chuckle. "My father was a mechanic. My husband was an electrician. And I spent 40 years working in building maintenance. I learned a woman needs to know how to fend for herself, especially when men think they know everything." "And why did you never mention this before?" "Because no one ever asked, dear. People see me as a grumpy old lady who complains about noise. They don't imagine I can tell the difference between a clogged pipe and a poorly installed washing machine." Olivia felt ashamed. She'd always seen Margaret as just the cranky neighbor, never bothering to learn who she really was. How many other people had she judged without knowing their stories? "There," Margaret exclaimed, satisfied. "I managed to free the mechanism. Now just turn the knob carefully." The sound of the knob turning was the most beautiful thing Olivia had heard all day. The door slowly opened, revealing Harold's worried face, Margaret's determined expression, and Dorothy's warm smile. At their feet, Shadow stared at her with bright green eyes, slowly swishing his tail. "Thank goodness," Dorothy exclaimed, placing a hand on her chest. "How are you feeling, dear?" Margaret asked now with a tenderness Olivia had never seen before. "I'm fine, really fine, and so grateful you're all here." Shadow immediately jumped into Olivia's lap, purring loudly and rubbing his head against her arm. The cat was clearly relieved, as if he fully understood what had happened and his own role in solving it. "That cat deserves a medal," Richard said, shaking his head in admiration. "Never seen anything like it." "How did he know about the key?" Harold asked, scratching his head. Olivia stroked Shadow, thoughtful. It was a question she'd like answered too. The cat had shown intelligence and problem-solving skills far beyond normal animal instinct. "Maybe he's smarter than we think," she said, looking into Shadow's eyes. Or maybe he has a story we don't know. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now continuing. After all the neighbors left and thanks were exchanged, Olivia found herself alone again with Shadow. But this time the loneliness didn't feel so frightening. On the contrary, she felt connected to the people around her in a way she had never experienced before. Shadow settled on the couch beside her, licking his paws as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Olivia watched the animal's every move, trying to understand how he knew exactly what to do in an emergency. The phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her mother calling from the wedding. "Hi, sweetheart. How are things over there?" Olivia hesitated for a moment. Should she mention the incident? Her parents would worry and probably cut their trip short. Or worse, they'd use it as an excuse to never leave her alone again. "Everything's fine, Mom. Shadow and I are taking care of each other." "That's wonderful. The wedding is beautiful, but we miss you. Are you sure you don't want to change your mind about having someone stay with you?" "I'm sure, Mom. I'm learning so much about myself and the people around me." After hanging up, Olivia kept thinking about her mother's words. She really was learning a lot about the importance of asking for help when needed, about not judging people by appearances, and about how a grey cat with a scar on his muzzle could be wiser than many humans. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Olivia noticed something she had overlooked before. Shadow watched her every move with an attention that went beyond normal feline curiosity. It was as if he was always on alert, ready to help if necessary. "Where did you learn to do that, Shadow?" she asked, offering him a piece of chicken. The cat ate delicately, then rubbed against her legs as he always did. But Olivia began to notice patterns in his behavior she had never picked up on before. The way he always stayed close when she transferred from the chair to the bed, how he meowed in a specific way when she forgot her medication, how he seemed to perfectly understand her schedule and routines. The next morning, while organizing some old papers, Olivia found something she had completely forgotten about, a folder with Shadow's adoption documents. At the time, she had been so focused on nursing his injuries that she hadn't paid much attention to the paperwork. Now, reading carefully, she discovered something surprising. Shadow wasn't just a stray cat. He had been registered as an emotional and therapeutic support animal. His previous owner, a man named James Wilson, was a veteran suffering from PTSD. The document mentioned that Shadow had been trained to recognize emergencies, seek help, and provide emotional support during crises. James Wilson had spent 2 years training Shadow before passing away from heart complications. Olivia felt tears welling in her eyes. Everything made sense now. Shadow's unusual behavior, his exceptional intelligence, his ability to act in emergencies. He wasn't just being a protective cat. He was using specific skills he had learned to care for someone vulnerable. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she said, stroking Shadow's head. "You knew I needed special care." Shadow purred and curled up in her lap, as if confirming her suspicions. Olivia felt both moved and awed. For 2 years, she had thought she was taking care of an injured, abandoned cat. In truth, it was Shadow who had been taking care of her. This discovery completely changed Olivia's perspective on her own life. If Shadow could use his skills to help people in difficult situations, maybe she, too, could turn her own experiences into something useful for others. It was then that an idea began to form in her mind. As a psychology student, she had always been interested in alternative therapies and support methods for people with disabilities. What if she could combine academic knowledge with Shadow's practical experience? On Monday, Olivia went to see her advisor at the university, Professor Dr. Michael Thompson, a 60-year-old man specializing in behavioral psychology. "Professor, I'd like to change the topic of my senior research project," she said as she walked into his office. "Oh, Olivia, what a surprise. What's the new topic?" "Therapeutic support animals for people with physical disabilities, specifically how cats can be trained to provide assistance in emergency situations." Professor Michael raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "That's a fascinating and very timely topic. Do you have any hands-on experience with this?" Olivia smiled, thinking of Shadow waiting at home. "I have a living example of how it works. And I believe I can develop a pilot program that bridges academic theory with practical application. Excellent. But you know you'll need empirical data, case studies, and likely partnerships with specialized institutions. I know, and I already have some ideas on how to get started. Leaving the university, Olivia felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had a clear purpose, a mission that united her passion for psychology with her personal experience and Shadow's unexpected wisdom. Over the following weeks, she immersed herself in research on therapeutic support animals. She discovered there were few programs in the United States specifically focused on cats, and even fewer tailored for people with physical disabilities. Most studies centered on dogs, leaving a huge gap in the field. Shadow became not just her companion, but also her first research subject. Olivia began documenting every behavior, noting patterns that could be replicated and taught to other animals. It was during this research that she made a discovery that would completely change the course of her life. While looking up information about James Wilson, Shadow's previous owner, she found an address that surprised her. James had lived just 3 blocks from her apartment. Curious, Olivia decided to investigate. She learned that James had been a respected figure in the neighborhood, known for his volunteer work with fellow veterans and his expertise in training therapy animals. After his passing, no one had continued his work. James's widow, Mrs. Eleanor Wilson, a 73-year-old woman, still lived in the same house. When Olivia visited her and explained about Shadow, Mrs. Wilson began to cry. "I knew he had found a new family," she said, inviting Olivia inside. "James always said Shadow had a way of choosing the right people." The house was filled with photographs of James with various animals, training certificates, and books on animal-assisted therapy. Mrs. Wilson showed Olivia a journal James had kept, documenting the progress of every animal he trained. "James dreamed of opening a training center for therapy animals," Mrs. Wilson explained. "But after he passed, I didn't know how to carry on his work." "What if we could do it together?" Olivia asked, feeling an immediate connection with the woman. "I have the academic knowledge, you have James's practical experience, and Shadow could be our first instructor." Mrs. Wilson's eyes lit up with an energy she hadn't felt in years. "Do you really think it's possible?" "I'm sure of it. And I know people who could help us." Olivia was thinking of Margaret and her technical expertise, Harold and his neighborhood connections, and Dorothy, who was always willing to lend a hand. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, what began as academic research blossomed into a community project that involved the entire neighborhood. Mrs. Margaret volunteered to adapt a space in the building's common area for initial training sessions. Mr. Harold rallied other building superintendents in the area to spread the word about the project. Mrs. Dorothy organized a fundraising campaign among the neighbors. The first challenge was convincing the building management to approve the project. Olivia prepared a detailed presentation explaining the benefits of animal-assisted therapy and how the program could add value to the building and community. "Are you proposing to turn part of our building into an animal training center?" asked the board president, Mr. Frank Miller, a middle-aged man known for being strict about rules. "Not exactly," Olivia replied calmly. "We're proposing a pilot community support program that uses proven scientific techniques to improve residents' quality of life, and the neighborhoods too." Mrs. Margaret, who had become a key ally, added, "Frank, you know our building has a bit of an outdated reputation in the area. This project could put us on the map as an innovative, socially responsible place." The argument worked. The board president approved a 6-month trial period on the condition that all activities were documented and no complaints arose from other residents. The second challenge was finding suitable animals for training. Mrs. Eleanor revealed that James had connections with several animal shelters in the city, many of which had cats and dogs with untapped therapeutic potential due to a lack of specialized programs. Olivia visited the Furry Friends shelter, located on New York's South Side. The director, Dr. Susan Parker, a 45-year-old veterinarian, was thrilled by the proposal. "We have several animals who show traits perfect for therapeutic work," she explained, leading Olivia through the shelter's halls. "But we've never had the resources or expertise to develop a formal program." It was there that Olivia met Moon, a 3-year-old Siamese cat who had been abandoned after an accident left her with a slight hind leg disability. Moon displayed remarkable empathy toward visitors with physical limitations, specifically gravitating toward them. "She does this with everyone," Dr. Susan said, watching Moon approach Olivia. "It's like she recognizes when someone faces challenges similar to hers." Olivia felt an instant connection with Moon. The cat not only approached, but positioned herself so Olivia could pet her comfortably without straining or adjusting. It was exactly the kind of intuitive behavior that could be honed with proper training. "I'd love to include Moon in our pilot program," Olivia said. "I think she and Shadow would make a great training pair." The third challenge was developing a training methodology that blended the techniques James had used with Shadow and the academic knowledge Olivia was acquiring. She spent weeks studying James's journals, identifying patterns and methods that could be systematized. James had developed a system based on positive reinforcement and gradual association. The animals learned to recognize specific signs of distress or need, and were trained to respond in particular ways, fetching help, offering physical comfort, or performing simple tasks like retrieving objects or activating devices. "The secret," James wrote in one of the last entries of his journal, "isn't training the animal to be something it's not, but developing and channeling the natural instincts of protection and empathy they already possess." Olivia realized this philosophy aligned perfectly with the modern behavioral psychology theories she studied at the university. It wasn't about conditioning automatic reflexes, but creating genuine communication between human and animal based on mutual understanding. With the methodology defined, Olivia began the first experiments with Shadow and Moon. The space Mrs. Margaret had prepared on the ground floor of the building became a small animal behavior lab. The first sessions focused on observing how Shadow and Moon interacted with each other and how they responded to different stimuli. Olivia was surprised to discover that Shadow seemed to be teaching Moon, demonstrating specific behaviors she should replicate. "It's like he knows he's training another animal," remarked Mrs. Eleanor, who had become an unofficial assistant to the project. "Maybe he remembers his own training with James," Olivia suggested. "Animals have much more complex memories than we realize." During one session, something extraordinary happened. Olivia was simulating an emergency, pretending she had fallen from her chair when Moon immediately ran to the emergency bell they had installed in the space. It was a behavior Shadow had only demonstrated twice, yet Moon was already replicating it without any formal training. "This is incredible," Olivia murmured, documenting everything in her research notebook. "They're communicating in a way we don't fully understand yet." Word about the project began spreading through the neighborhood. People with different needs started reaching out to Olivia, interested in joining the program. Mrs. Rose, a 78-year-old woman struggling with anxiety after losing her husband. Mr. Peter, a retiree who had lost his vision due to diabetes. Young people with depression, elderly folks facing loneliness, individuals recovering from physical and emotional trauma. Each case brought new challenges and discoveries. Olivia realized she wasn't just training animals, she was building a community support network that connected people through a shared cause. The program took an unexpected turn when Professor Michael decided to visit. He arrived skeptical, expecting an amateur initiative, but left completely impressed by the organization and preliminary results. "Olivia, this is much more than a senior thesis project," he said, flipping through her notes and observing a session between Shadow and Mr. Peter. "This is groundbreaking research that should be published and expanded." "You really think so?" she asked uncertainly. "I'm certain, and I know people who might be interested in funding an expansion of this work." That was how the small pilot project from Chinatown caught the attention of Dr. Emily Roberts, coordinator of an applied psychology research institute affiliated with Columbia University. Dr. Emily had spent years studying alternative therapies and was looking for innovative projects to support. "Your work is filling an important gap in the field," she said during a video call with Olivia. "Animal-assisted therapy for people with physical disabilities is still an underexplored area in the United States." The conversation led to a partnership proposal that would completely transform the project's scope. The institute offered funding to expand the research, proper training facilities, and academic supervision to turn the findings into scientific publications. But there was one condition. Olivia would have to move to the university campus and leave the community project in the neighborhood. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," explained Professor Michael. "You could reach so many more people through an academic platform." Olivia found herself facing an unexpected dilemma. On one hand, the chance to turn her research into something with national reach, backed by resources and scientific recognition. On the other, the community that had formed around the project, the people who relied on the program, and most of all, the promise she had made to Mrs. Eleanor to continue Richard's work. That night, sitting in her living room with Shadow in her lap, Olivia talked to the cat as she always did when she needed to organize her thoughts. "What do you think, Shadow? Should we accept the offer and leave here?" Shadow stared at her with those intelligent green eyes, as if genuinely considering the question. Then, unusually, he stood up and walked to the window overlooking the shared balcony. Outside, Mrs. Margaret watered her plants, Mr. Peter exercised Moon with basic commands, and Mrs. Dorothy chatted animatedly with Mrs. Eleanor about the program's progress. "You're right," Olivia said, smiling. "Our mission is here, with these people." The next morning, Olivia called Dr. Emily with a counter-proposal. Instead of moving to the campus, she suggested a partnership where the institute would provide resources and scientific oversight for the neighborhood project, turning it into a community research center. "That's an interesting approach," Dr. Emily replied after a long silence. "Applied research directly in the community, with active participation from the beneficiaries. It could be even more valuable than an isolated lab study." "Exactly. And the results would be more authentic, because they'd reflect real-world conditions." The proposal was accepted, and the small project in the Chinatown building officially became the James Wilson Community Center for Animal-Assisted Therapy. The name honored the man who planted the first seed of the idea through Shadow's training. The opening ceremony was simple but moving. All the building's residents attended, along with representatives from the university, the animal shelter, and people from other neighborhoods who had already shown interest in the program. Mrs. Eleanor cut the ribbon with trembling hands. "James would be so proud," she said, tears in her eyes. "He always believed small actions could lead to big changes." Olivia watched the scene with a sense of fulfillment she had never imagined possible. What had started as a moment of despair in the bathroom had grown into something far greater than she or anyone could have predicted. Shadow, as always, was by her side, observing everything with the calm of someone who had known all along things would work out. Olivia was certain that somehow the cat had orchestrated every step of this journey. 6 months after the opening, the center was already serving over 50 people regularly and had a waiting list of families interested in adopting therapeutically trained animals. Olivia had graduated with honors, and her research on developing therapeutic behaviors in felines to support people with physical disabilities was accepted for publication in an international scientific journal. But the numbers and academic recognition weren't what mattered most to her. What truly mattered were the personal stories she witnessed every day. Like Mrs. Rose, who hadn't left her house in 2 years after losing her husband, but had now returned to social activities after adopting Honey, an orange cat trained to recognize anxiety episodes. Or there's Mr. Peter, who regained the confidence to walk the streets of the neighborhood with the help of Moon, who learned to guide him through specific commands. Or the story of Emma, a 16-year-old who suffered a bicycle accident and was temporarily in a wheelchair. Working with the animals not only aided her physical recovery, but also sparked her interest in studying veterinary medicine. Each story confirmed for Olivia that she had made the right decision. Science and academia were important, but applying knowledge to improve people's real lives was what truly made a difference. One afternoon, while documenting the progress from another week, Olivia received an unexpected call. It was a journalist from Popular Science magazine, interested in doing a feature on the project. "I learned about your work through an academic publication," explained the journalist, Sarah Bennett. I was impressed by the community-focused approach and the results you're achieving. The article was published 3 months later under the title Feline Intelligence Revolutionizing Therapy in America. The piece highlighted not just the scientific aspects of the project, but above all, the human stories behind the numbers. Shadow appeared in the main photo, sitting on Olivia's lap with an expression the journalist described as ancient wisdom. The caption read, "Shadow, the cat who changed an entire community's life through one heroic act in the bathroom." The article's impact went far beyond what Olivia had expected. Calls began pouring in from people across the country interested in replicating the model in their own communities, veterinarians wanting to specialize in the field, psychology students asking to intern at the center. "I never imagined it would grow this much," commented Mrs. Margaret, who had become the center's technical coordinator. "It's because you planted the right seed in the right place," replied Mrs. Eleanor, smiling as she watched Moon teach new tricks to a recently arrived cat. Olivia agreed, but she knew the real credit belonged to Shadow. Everything had started with the intelligence and determination of that grey cat who refused to leave his favorite human in trouble. A year after the bathroom incident, Olivia organized a special party to celebrate the project's unofficial anniversary. Everyone involved was invited: building residents, program participants, university partners, animal shelter representatives, and even the building manager, Frank, who had become one of the initiative's biggest supporters. The party was held in the building's common area, decorated with photos of the animals and people who had been part of the program. Each picture told a story of resilience, connection, and hope. During her speech, Olivia spoke about how a moment of vulnerability had transformed into the greatest opportunity for personal and professional growth in her life. "I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness but of wisdom," she said, with Shadow peacefully sleeping in her lap. "And that sometimes the most extraordinary solutions come from the most unexpected places." Mrs. Margaret, who had become one of Olivia's closest friends, added, "And I learned that judging people by first impressions is a mistake that makes us miss wonderful opportunities for connection." The party lasted well into the night, with people sharing stories, animals showing off their skills, and a general sense of community that forever changed the dynamic of that building. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this amazing story. Do you believe Shadow really planned everything from the start? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.